What's going on? Final Destination is a fun franchise indeed. Every movie is jam-packed with horrible ways to die, which is why we keep coming back. That being said, I'm not a huge fan of every sequel, and my worry was that number 6 was going to just be, or at least feel like it exists to make money rather than, oh, they actually had some sort of creative story. So we're going to discuss it. I need your thoughts. What's the best Final Destination movie? Leave that comment below.
Drinks all around.
So in Bloodlines, the 6th entry in the franchise. First of all, this movie's rated R for basically anything that has to do with death. That's obvious. Second of all, it follows a college student who returns home to find that one person can save her family from the inevitability of death. And I want to start off with how this movie starts off, and that is this big series of chaotic events that all happen in the span of like 15 minutes, but it's one sequence that gets your blood pumping, it gets everything going, and the entire audience, at least the theater that I was in, was on the edge of their seats because that opening sequence is insane. And we've seen several of those in this franchise. It's been a few years, admittedly, since I've watched many of the movies because it's been so long since they released, but this is one of the craziest sequences of all of them, and frankly, it's one of my favorites. You couldn't have started this movie off on a better note to allow us to know the kind of movie that this is going to be, but to also let fans know, hey, we're not just making a sequel to make a sequel. We actually have a cool concept here, but we know we can inject the chaos that fans love and appreciate from the rest of the franchise. So that's cool, right? You have people involved in this movie that care about Final Destination, and it's crazy to even say that because Austin, all it is people dying in weird ways. But if you look at some of the stories in some of the movies, they're about a little more than that. It's just the ones that are bad that don't quite do it.
Uh-oh.
But that first Final Destination is not bad. And it's crazy seeing this Rotten Tomatoes score because it's in the mid-90s right now, yet you go look at the other Final Destination movies, and even some of the better ones have a lower Rotten Tomatoes score, a sequel that actually does it justice. That's what I was looking for, right? And this is, I believe, a little more flawed of a movie than what some are seeing based on the really high praise from a lot of critics, because the story itself is extremely generic. Maybe I wanted a little more from the characters, and I'll dive into that here in just a second. But all in all, Bloodlines delivers what it needed to deliver to rejuvenate a franchise of this nature, and that is getting the mystery and the madness and the bloodiness of it all, Bloodlines, getting it right, nailing what it needed to nail, even if the writing isn't necessarily as up to par as the rest of the movie. Another complaint that I've seen based on the trailers, and one that I actually shared, my fear was that this was going to look too CGI, that some of the deaths weren't going to have that impact because maybe they aren't as visceral, or maybe they just don't look or feel as realistic as what we've seen in the past. I want to stop myself right there and say, yeah, there is a lot of CGI in this movie, especially in that opening sequence where something's happening way up high in the air. There's fire, there's glass, there's bodies flying, and so they didn't really have a choice there. But to make it as big as they needed to make it, they did a nice job of making it just believable enough. Yeah, it's a little CGI heavy, all right, and they're working with the budget that they're working with, but all in all, it didn't bother me as much to do the level of carnage that they wanted to do. There had to be a level that they hit, and ultimately I believe that they hit that. So yes, that opening sequence was awesome, but the rest of the way, you are wondering, and there's a little bit of a gap between that sequence. Then you've got to introduce characters, tell the story. What does Bloodlines actually mean? We are carrying this weight from generation to generation. And then, of course, the one character that has to maybe convince some other characters that this is happening, which we've seen several times in horror movies, that takes some time. And so there is a gap between that opening sequence and the next time we see the blood and the gore. And that gap may make people feel a little antsy, like, all right, guys, we get it. We've got to introduce characters. Now, how is this penultimate threat going to be resolved? That's what had me hooked far more than all of the individual characters that we were dealing with. And there's something about a story we've seen 1,000 times before, our lead trying to convince everyone else that he or she in this case, is not crazy. Guys, I'm not a lunatic, even though it looks to you, all of you, that I am a lunatic. But as we start to reach where it all comes to light and where it all crescendos, she looks less and less crazy. And everyone involved is like, no, well. And as we get further into it, the building blocks of each devastating event, some of them, there's a series of things happening. Maybe it doesn't end in death. You think it's going to, maybe it doesn't. And we've seen this before, right? But just the way they go about it with those big key sequences you see in the trailer, one involving a pop machine, one involving, going in and getting an MRI. I don't want to do that again. And as dark as this gets, there's a part of you, a piece of you that believes a lot of these characters can make it out alive. And you know they're not going to. Now, some of the characters I didn't care about. I'm like, yeah, if you get smushed, then at least make it entertaining. And the movie did. All of the deaths were entertaining. There wasn't one death that was underwhelming, even when you see it coming from a mile away. And there's one example I have, I'm not going to say it. You see it coming, it was still super entertaining. But some of those characters, I'm like, yeah, okay. But the other ones, I'm like, man, there's a chance, right? There's a chance that everything is going to be okay with everyone. But we know it's not going to. And that's the beauty of Final Destination. You want people to suffer. But ultimately, a movie like this, a sequel like this that comes out several years later, you want to be entertained. You want to have fun. Fans of this franchise are looking for one specific thing, and that is how chaotic can you get? And I believe Bloodlines does that. It is brutal. But that brutality is exactly what you're looking for. Not brutal in a bad way, like, Megalopolis was a brutal watch. Final Destination Bloodlines is a brutal watch, but in a good way. Hey, if you want to support this channel, dropping that like, sharing this video on your social medias, share this review, and I'll give you, I can't give you much, but I'll give you another video tomorrow. That's all I have to offer. I appreciate it big time. Again, I'd love to know your favorite Final Destination movie. I'd say a lot of people will say the first one. I'll still say the first one, but maybe there's a sneaky sequel in there. Bloodlines encapsulates the insanity of this franchise to perfection in its opening sequence and never lets its foot off the gas. This entry has a level of self-awareness that eases some of the lunacy at points, and it features just enough chaos to draw your attention away from an otherwise generic storyline. While it doesn't have the juice of the original, the creative ways we see characters meet their maker should satisfy most. It injects just enough mystery to keep you on your toes, but the magic lies within the madness, and this is pure madness. If you're looking for an Oscar contender, I apologize, this is not that film, but for a sixth movie in a big long franchise, it's like when Saw 10 came out a few years ago. I'm like, that had no reason being that fun. I feel the same way about this one. It had no reason being this fun, and my theater was loving it. We were all walking out like, don't get around me, car, vending machine, you back off.